At 1300 hours local time, the Pacific looked calm, deceptively calm. The kind of calm that feels wrong. 400 meters northeast of the Galapagos Islands, a gray-blue surface trembled under heat haze, disturbed by something beneath. Something that shouldn't be there. The United States military was already watching. From 5,000 meters above, a U.S. Air Force HC-130J Combat King II from the 129th Rescue Wing circled in a slow, disciplined orbit. Inside its fuselage, under the vibration of 4 roaring turboprops, a radar operator stared at a flickering green screen. A contact pulsed at the edge of detection, faint, irregular, almost teasing. 3 sweeps visible, 9 gone. It was like someone flicking a light switch on and off in another room. A whisper in the static. But to trained eyes, that whisper meant everything. It was a Narco submarine, a semi-submersible craft designed for one purpose only: to disappear. Fiberglass hull, no radar return, no AIS transponder, no heat signature worth mentioning. The perfect ghost in a sea of ghosts. If it reached open shipping lanes, it could vanish among 1,000 legitimate echoes. Cargo ships, trawlers, oil tankers, all the noise of global trade, but not yet. The sub was still crawling at 8 knots, far too slow to blend in. It had maybe 4 hours before safety. The clock had started. The radar operator adjusted gain, then switched to synthetic aperture mode. The faint blip brightened for a moment, metal outboards catching a glint of sun. The system tagged it. Unidentified low-profile vessel, heading 314 degrees, speed 8 knots. 8 knots told the whole story. Nobody legitimate moved that slow this far from anywhere. That speed meant heavy cargo. Probably 3 tons of cocaine packed so low the deck was awash with every swell. Every wave slapped across the hull, washing over a load worth tens of millions. The bearing matched one of the known cartel routes, a corridor running from Colombia toward Mexico's Pacific coast, a route that had changed hands, profits, and allegiances for decades. From above, it looked like open ocean. In reality, it was a highway of shadows. The tactical coordinator leaned over his console, flipping to infrared. The thermal screen came alive. There it was, a faint warm spine glowing against cold seawater, a thin exhaust plume bleeding through camouflage paint. The vessel's hull rode less than 20 inches above the surface, painted ocean gray to match the Pacific itself. Beyond 500 meters, it was invisible to the naked eye, but the sky was watching. Spotting it was the easy part. Catching it would take a miracle. The math didn't favor them. The nearest Coast Guard cutter, USCGC Seneca, a 270-foot medium-endurance ship, was 50 miles away. At flank speed, 20 knots, she needed 2.5 hours to reach the Intercept. The smugglers would reach congested waters in 4. That left maybe 90 minutes of tactical margin, thin as paper. Unless something faster could close the gap. The call came through encrypted channels. Seneca, this is Falcon 1. Confirm intercept coordinates. Copy, Falcon 1. Launch authorization green. Repeat, green. Aboard Seneca, life changed in an instant. The low thrum of turbines became a roar. Crew rushed to stations. The bridge lights shifted to red combat mode. The flight deck, moments ago drenched in sunlight and routine, transformed into organized chaos. The helicopter crew sprinted across non-skid steel, boots echoing under the rotor dome. Salt spray shimmered around them like dust in a spotlight. Mechanics pulled tie-downs free while the rotors still spun. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't meant to be. This was about speed. Pre-flight cut to half, the pilot ordered. Weapons on deck. The M240 machine gun clattered into its pintle mount. Ammunition belts snaked across the cabin floor. Fuel calculations were scribbled across wet kneeboards. They all knew the math, and it wasn't good. The Intercept lay 150 miles out, 1 hour at cruise. The MH-65 had 3.5 hours of endurance on paper, but combat hovering drank fuel twice as fast. They'd have to stop the smugglers, hold them for nearly 3 hours, and still limp home. The gauge didn't promise that much mercy. Still, orders were orders. The gunner checked his mount again. The traverse motor, repaired just yesterday, groaned under test. Salt corrosion in the bearings. Freed with penetrating oil and a prayer, salt always found the weak point. It ate wires, circuits, seals, men. The ocean never rushed. It just waited for you to make a mistake. The pilot slid into his harness, hands steady but slow. He knew this kind of mission, the ones that sounded easy, until the elements turned against you. He scanned the gauge cluster, then the horizon. Fuel, hydraulics, weapons, comms. All green. He gave a thumbs up. The turbines screamed to life. The MH-65 lifted from the deck, nose down, rotors cutting the Pacific wind. Below, Seneca's gray hull pushed into the swells, white water curling off her bow. Within seconds, the helicopter vanished into haze, a bright orange speck dissolving into blue. For the next hour, ocean and sky merged into a single cold horizon. The crew said little. Radios crackled with position updates from the HC-130J overhead. Target steady, heading 314, speed constant, still 8 knots. The pilot traced the course on his knee map. Every minute mattered. One eye on the ocean, one eye on the fuel gauge. At 80 miles out, the sun dropped behind thin clouds. Shadows streaked across the water. The sub was somewhere below, riding the line between detection and disappearance. At 40 miles, the radar lit it up, a smear, barely visible. At 20, it was solid. "Visual contact," the co-pilot called out. "Bearing 090, half a mile." The pilot dipped the nose and descended to 200 feet. The helicopter roared down through clear air, the ocean rushing up until it filled every window. And then, impact. Rotor wash hammered the sea, flattening waves into chaos. The low-profile sub rocked hard, rolling under the invisible weight. Spray blasted sideways, white against gray. The smugglers must have felt it like a hand pressing down from heaven. The pilot steadied the hover. The gunner moved into position, hands tight on the M240's grips. He pressed the traverse control. Nothing. He tried again. The motor whined and locked. Dead. 45 degrees off the nose, frozen solid. Salt had crystallized in the bearings, welding metal into stone. 40 pounds of resistance in a system built for two. They had a machine gun that couldn't aim, and 2 hours of endurance left to hold this position. No discussion, no blame, just adaptation. The pilot rolled the aircraft sideways, a crab hover, 50 knots of forward drift to align the jammed gun with the target. It wasn't in any manual, but manuals don't fight the ocean. Fuel flow jumped immediately. 95 gallons an hour instead of 76. They didn't care. The first burst hit the water 100 meters ahead of the sub. The smugglers didn't react, still moving, still at 8 knots. Second burst, 50 meters, still nothing. Third burst, 10 meters. Bullets slammed into water close enough to rattle the hull. That did it. The outboards coughed and died. Silence replaced the drone. The Narco sub drifted, bow lifting and falling with each wave. Inside the helicopter, the air smelled of hot metal and cordite. Sweat ran down the gunner's face. His jaw was locked, but his eyes stayed on target. The pilot eased into a wide orbit, 200 feet up. The gun hung sideways like a broken weather vane, but the target was neutralized, for now. They'd stopped the vessel. Step 1 complete. Step 2, keep it that way. Below them, the ocean stretched endless and blue. But somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, more engines were waking, because nobody runs a Narco sub alone. The pilot glanced at the fuel gauge again. 175 gallons. Enough for 90 minutes, maybe less. The math kept getting tighter. He looked down at the drifting hull and thought about what came next. Holding, waiting, praying the ocean didn't change its mind. Far above, the HC-130J watched it all. Silent, distant. On its radar screens, new returns were beginning to form. small, fast, and moving like predators. The storm hadn't even begun yet. 12 minutes after the Narco sub stopped moving, the ocean changed again. On the radar, 2 new contacts appeared. Small, fast, deliberate. They were coming in low from the southwest, 40 knots and climbing. The pilot saw the returns before the radio confirmed them. 2 boats, side by side, running a perfect intercept vector. He didn't need to ask who they were. Protection craft, cartel standard procedure, always 10 or 15 minutes behind their submarine. Close enough to help, far enough to deny involvement. These weren't rescue boats. They were insurance policies, armed with outboards, arrogance, and automatic rifles. At 2,000 meters, the contacts began to weave, a slow, taunting circle around the scene. The helicopter climbed to 300 feet, holding an orbit over the Narco sub, keeping one eye on the crippled vessel and one on the newcomers. The gunner still fought the M240's mount, muscles shaking against rusted steel. Every attempt to twist the traverse left or right ended in a metallic groan. The mount was frozen solid. Salt had done its job perfectly, but the pilot knew the ocean didn't wait for tools or maintenance. It forced decisions, fast ones. He tilted the nose, holding a 50-knot lateral drift to keep the jammed weapon aimed. The helicopter looked awkward in the air, flying sideways in defiance of aerodynamics. But it worked. Sometimes that was enough. Down below, the go-fast boats closed to 1,500 meters. The pilot felt their intent like heat. They were testing him, edging closer, pulling away, probing for weakness. The dance began. One boat surged forward, closing the gap in seconds. The pilot banked hard, swinging the helicopter's nose toward it. Even with a broken mount, the message was clear. We see you. We're ready. The first boat veered off, wake foaming white. The second came in from the opposite side, timing its approach perfectly, trying to split the helicopter's attention. Pack tactics. Predators in the open ocean. For 15 minutes the standoff held. Helicopter circling, boats probing. The Narco sub drifting in the center like bait. Inside the MH-65, fuel alarms flickered amber. 140 gallons. 90 minutes of airtime, less if they stayed at combat power. The pilot's mind did quiet math. Seneca was still 90 minutes away. The boats knew it too. They weren't trying to win a fight. They were trying to wait the helicopter out, force it to back off, to choose fuel over duty. That's how most fights at sea end, not with shots, but with endurance. But this crew wasn't leaving, not yet. The gunner pressed his shoulder into the jammed weapon and forced 10 degrees of movement. A sound like dry bone cracking filled the cabin. The mount shifted, barely, enough to send a new burst across the bow of the nearest boat. Tracer rounds cut through mist and salt air, slapping water 50 meters ahead. The go-fast boat spun in panic, throwing spray high. Both boats backed off, widening their circle again. The pilot exhaled slowly, eyes on the gauge. 120 gallons, 80 minutes. The ocean felt infinite now, a desert made of water, fuel, and seconds. The Coast Guard doesn't retreat, but physics doesn't care about pride. They held position, watching, waiting. Every 5 minutes, a voice came over comms from the HC-130J above. Seneca closing distance. Estimated time on station, 82 minutes. Each report was both comfort and curse. Time didn't move fast enough. Then, without warning, the radar flared again. The protection boats broke pattern. Both accelerated, closing in from opposite sides, 800 meters and closing fast. The pilot didn't choose a side. He chose height. Pulling collective, the MH-65 climbed to 500 feet, exposing both boats in the same line of sight. He banked left, hard enough to rattle the cabin. The world tilted. Spray and horizon swapped places. For 10 full seconds, the go-fast boats held their course, trying to bluff through. Then, they broke off, turning southwest, throttles wide open, 45 knots and climbing. Retreating into open water, heading for the invisible line of international jurisdiction, They hadn't rescued anyone. They hadn't retrieved the cargo. But they had succeeded in their secondary mission, to bleed the helicopter's fuel tanks dry. The pilot stared at the gauge, 100 gallons. The number looked smaller every minute. He turned back toward the Narco sub below. It hadn't moved. 3 men aboard, likely waiting, hoping their friends would return. The sea rocked them gently, waves tapping the hull like clock hands. For the first time in hours, the radio fell silent. Only the turbine whine and the slow rhythm of the Pacific filled the cockpit. Then, at last, the voice came through, gravelly, calm, final. Seneca on station. Stand by for visual. The gray silhouette of the cutter appeared through haze, bow slicing the swells. The ship looked massive, almost prehistoric compared to the fiberglass toy it was about to devour. Before Seneca, the captain slowed engines to 5 knots. Launch crews ran to stations. The storm was building fast. 6-foot seas, 8-footers forming. The barometer was dropping, pressure falling, rain scenting the air. They had an hour, maybe 2, before launching small craft would become suicide. The crane operator took position at the David, the heavy swing arm used to deploy the 7-meter rigid hull inflatable boat, or rib. The steel cable held 8,600 pounds of boat and men, and that was in calm seas. Now, every wave multiplied the load. Compression on the rise, tension on the fall. He watched the water carefully, counted the rhythm. 8 seconds between crests. He'd have maybe 4 seconds of calm water to drop safely. The coxswain climbed aboard the rib, engines already idling. He looked small against the steel walls of the cutter. Launch window in 3, 2, 1. The crane swung. The rib dropped 6 feet, hit hard, and bounced. Spray exploded. The operator punched the throttles before the next wave arrived. The small craft shot forward at 20 knots, escaping Seneca's wake. The MH-65 circled above, fuel now at 90 gallons. The pilot watched the rib speed toward the Narco sub, every second eating the distance. The sea was turning gray-green, the horizon smearing into cloud. At 100 meters, the coxswain lined up the approach. Controlled collision. It was a technique learned through pain. Aim directly for midship, then pivot the starboard throttle at the last second, turning the impact into a sliding lock. The rib slammed sideways into the Narco sub, inflatable collar grinding against fiberglass. The impact sounded like metal tearing underwater. The first boarding officer jumped, timing it with the rise of a wave. 2 seconds to cross, no margin for error. He landed on the sub's wet deck, 40 pounds of gear dragging him down. For a moment he slipped, then found footing, weapon raised. The second officer followed, then the third. 3 figures against a world of steel and water. Below deck, the smugglers hesitated. They knew it was over. Hands appeared first, then faces, sunburned, hollow-eyed, resigned. Within minutes, all 3 were restrained on deck. The search began, quick, methodical. A cramped compartment no larger than a bathroom, lined with plastic-wrapped bricks stacked like bricks of dull gold. 3 tons, by rough count, each worth a fortune that would never be spent. Above, the helicopter still circled, its gun hanging useless, its tanks nearly dry. The pilot watched the boarding from 200 feet, relief mixing with exhaustion. The sea below looked endless, but now it felt conquered, at least for the day. He called down to Seneca. "Mission complete. Returning to ship." The cutter turned slowly to port, opening her flight deck to the incoming bird. The MH-65 descended into the spray, engines coughing against wind shear. Fuel warning blared red. 70 gallons, 60, 55. The skids touched down hard, metal scraping against deck. Crew rushed forward to lash the helicopter before the next swell. Engines spooled down. The rotors slowed. And for the first time in hours, the noise stopped. The captain walked to the rail, watching the small rib return, towing its captured prize. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavy. The ocean swallowed light, turning everything into shades of gray. Below decks, the boarding crew cataloged the evidence. 3 suspects, 3 tons of narcotics, 1 vessel. But numbers didn't capture what had happened out there. How close it had come to fuel starvation, to mechanical failure, to chaos. In the operation log, it would read routine interdiction, a simple phrase for something that had nearly gone wrong a dozen different ways. By sunset, the sub was chained to Seneca's stern, half submerged, awaiting tow. The men who built it would already be building another. That was the nature of the ocean trade. Endless repetition, endless reinvention. But something had changed that day. The crew had seen the edge, where machines break, where courage replaces procedure, where silence becomes the enemy. Out here, nothing is guaranteed. Not technology, not command, not even survival. The ocean doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. It just watches and waits for the next signal to flicker across the radar. 3 sweeps visible, 9 sweeps gone. Somewhere, beneath the waves, another ghost was already starting its run north. And above, in the endless blue, another crew would take off to find it. Because the war at sea never ends. It only pauses long enough for the engines to cool.